So do you want to gain some sanity in your relationship and ditch the dysfunction? I want to ditch the dysfunction. I did that a lot, but I never thought about ditching the dysfunction and then fixing it. Or sometimes you just don't have that ability to connect with your partner and say, listen, we can fix this, and you get that blank stare. And every time you say something, there's that blank stare. And then one day you say, okay, I'm ditching you now too. And that was that. And they go, why? What happened? I don't understand. So we have psychiatrist Grant-Brenner joining us on Big Blend Radio today to share some of the insights from his latest book he co-authored with psychoanalyst Mark Borg and registered nurse Daniel Berry. It is a follow-up to their book, Irrelationship, and it's called Relationship-Sanity, Creating and Maintaining Healthy Relationships. It's published by Central Recovery Press. Of course, you can get it at Amazon, all those great places, but I encourage you to go to their website, irrelationship.com. They've got videos, blogs, and all kinds of good stuff on there to keep you connected, and a great Facebook page, too. And you can also join Dr. Brenner on his website, Grant-H-Brenner-MD.com. Welcome to the show, Dr. Brenner. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for those kind words.
Hey, we're excited about this. You know, reading your book, I'm like, okay, I can use some of these tools in general relationships, because I think all relationships are work, right? All of them.
Yep. Life takes work, but you have to play.
Yeah, we like to play. We like to do that.
I think that play is more important than work.
I know. But I wanted to touch base on. I call you the three amigos of relationships because it's really interesting. You know how you've done this with 2 books and all the blogs and videos. But let's start with irrelationship. I love that word. And, you know, how you go from irrelationship to relationship sanity. So it's 2 books and 2, it is a dysfunction to the functionality, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Irrelationship was written for individuals, and it covers a lot of pretty heavy stuff about childhood and how the mind works. And we get into how individuals can work on changing the way they see things and the way they do things. We have a process called the dream sequence, which we can talk about along with some of the other things, which involves discovery, repair, alternatives, empowerment, and developing mutuality. In Relationship Sanity, we had a lot of people who they found Irrelationship was really helpful, but kind of strong for them because a lot of the psychological discovery was up front. So we wrote a book for couples, and we tried to make it easier for people to get into it together at the beginning, because some of the unconscious things that people need to deal with in order to get along better are also hard for people to take too much of too fast emotionally.
And when you talk about, having to acknowledge things, that's probably the hardest part, and especially if somebody else is acknowledging it for you, but you maybe not be in the space to acknowledge it and kind of look at, especially when it goes back to childhood and things like that. Everybody's had some kind of different experience, some worse than others, some very traumatic. So when it comes to a relationship, you know, that's the thing I thought was really great about Relationship Sanity is that you don't necessarily have to break up with someone to fix yourself, right? And you don't need to fix the other person.
People get stuck. Yeah, people get stuck, and it becomes very much either or, and either I'm going to be stuck, miserable, or we're going to end the relationship. Fundamentally, if someone is in an irrelationship, in a dysfunctional relationship, where one person is playing the role of performer, a fixer, trying to solve all the problems, the other person is the audience. They sit back and pretend like they want help. They're involved in a kind of a fake relationship, and it's not safe because there's anxiety about getting close to each other. But the kicker is that a lot of times that couple isn't aware of their own anxiety, and so you get in a catch-22. And it's not just that they feel anxious. It's like we're not quite aware that we feel anxious. We're not quite aware we don't feel safe, and so you're not ready to even talk about things. So when someone tells you something about yourself, and it's whether it's true or not makes a difference. But if it hits home and it's true and you're not ready to hear it, what do we usually do?
We just ignore.
We get
or
mad.
say no. We get it. Yeah, it's that flight or flee. Yeah,
totally react without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. You react without thinking. You either withdraw, or you start attacking the other person.
Yeah.
This is typical, right? Well, you did this, you did that, and couples therapists always tell people to talk about where you're coming from. I felt hurt when you said this, not you are such a nasty person.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Those are two ways of saying the same thing, right? Like you're a jerk and I felt hurt.
Mm-hmm.
If you say I felt hurt to someone, there's a better chance that they'll listen to you.
And don't we have to sometimes, just in general, breathe before we speak? That whole thing, think before we speak. When you're in a heated place, that goes right out the window. And then instead of, Nancy and I have a thing is if somebody says something horrible, whether it's in business, whether it's us or, a romantic relationship, we just go, it's easier to just say, ouch, like that hurt, instead of going, you suck, what you said or whatever, you know what I mean? So there's that kind of thing. But when you're in that zone and if a lot of buttons have been pushed, it's really hard to get your brain to that point of, say that, the ouch, or this made me feel this way.
Yeah, that's right. You're activated. Your sympathetic nervous system, like you said, fight or flight system is activated. And when that happens, it knocks out the higher parts of the brain, the frontal cortex, and then habits take over. And those habits are the habits that we learned usually growing up. And if you grew up in an environment where people couldn't deal with conflict, if your parents fought, or if there was any kind of abuse or neglect, then I like to call it brain jack, like hijacking. Your brain gets hijacked by these old brain systems. Yeah, and you lash out, and then the other person gets defensive, and then you end up repeating the pattern together from each of your childhoods. They come together. There's a beautiful idea, which is when birds sing together, the song that they sing together is unique, and it's different from each of their individual songs. When couples love together, that's true, but when they fight together, it's also true. It ends up being kind of a combination of their individual family dysfunction. And the problem is, as you're saying, people have a lot of trouble being vulnerable, especially with someone who's, hurt them a lot before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a bad idea, right?
Yeah, I think you go into kind of a survival mode, even though your survival is not necessarily the problem or the thing that you're not really in survival trouble, like you're not going to die.
It feels like you're going to die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you I think your system just goes like, okay, it's time to run, or it's time to fight,
or time to cry.
Yeah. Or go put your head under a pillow for 3 days and don't talk to anybody.
Well, the one tool in your book that I think is really, really powerful and effective is the 40-20-40. It's like a cool rule. This is interesting because to me it kind of like diffuses the anger because you both have to take responsibility and take ownership.
Yeah, and so the 40-20-40 is a kind of conversation. It's a tool to facilitate communication, and it's also a framework for understanding what healthy communication can look like. So the 40s refer to each person's share of the airtime, of the emotional resources. So I have 40. I always said I had 20. I must be thinking about my own relationships anymore. I'm not getting enough. But, each person gets the same. They get their 40. The other person gets their 40. That's 80. And then there's 20, which at least 20 is set aside for the relationship itself. Because the relationship is your third partner. The two people in a couple or the 10 people if it's a work team or whatever, they have an obligation to tend to the relationship. And so the 40-20-40 spells that out very clearly, where your responsibility starts and also where it ends. You don't take responsibility for the other person's 40%. In 12-step programs, they talk about, you keep your side of the street clean. It's not your job to clean up the other person's side of the street, so there's good boundaries.
That's good. I like that. That's really true.
You want me to go on to describe how it works, or you want to talk about the structure? What makes sense for you?
Yeah, to me, when you look at how people do that and have that conversation, what I'd like to know is how do we bridge the gap to, okay, we need to do this. How do you get the other partner on the same plate to do it? And if they're not at that point, I mean, where do you go from there? Do you just go, okay, we're not in it anymore, or that part of it? How do we get to because the tool is effective, but how do you get the other person to take a look at it?
Yeah, you're pointing out one of the most important things is that people have to collaborate. And if you have one person who wants to work on the relationship, and the other person, they want the relationship to be better, and they're not going to leave, but they also, for some emotional reason, probably aren't there to kind of sit down and talk. What do you do? People always ask me that question, and I don't like it because it's a hard question to answer. But
Sorry.
A big part of it is no, it's okay. I've answered it a few times. I think it's not a satisfying answer because people want an answer that says, well, you can get your partner to do the 40-20-40 with you tomorrow. And that's not usually the answer. The answer is more like, if you're really interested in seeing if the relationship has a chance, you may be able to get your partner to do this work with you in a month or 2 or 3 months. So number one, you really have to sit down and take inventory. What does this relationship mean to me? And am I willing to be emotionally vulnerable? Or am I just going to say, hey, I found this tool. Oh, you don't want to use it. Buzz off. So how committed am I? And how much time am I willing to give it? You really have to take stock of what's important. And so really, if you really want to make it work, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say you have to take it over yourself and almost start working it without the other person being part of it. You have to have that going. You need to be conscious. And like when you're saying take stock, take inventory, I think that's the thing, too, in regards to any relationships or even your life. You have to carve out that time of, I need to, have a meeting with myself. You have to.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite topics is self-relationship, or I call it sometimes deep self-care, because I'm not just talking about exercise and yoga. I'm talking about exercise and yoga, but it's also your relationship with yourself, how loving you are with yourself, how passionate you are, and how you govern yourself, how you run your life. There's many factors to it. But if you want to get to that place with your partner, you have to, I think one of the critical things, aside from doing your own personal work, is you have to become very compassionate, because that person is not going to come around right away. And so if you think you're going to do something and then they're going to come to you the next day and say, sorry, honey, let's sit down and talk and work through things, maybe they will, but if it's been years of rough patches, you have to develop your compassion. And in relationship sanity, compassion-based practice is like the first thing that we talk about as an exercise for people to use.
And you talk about open-hearted listening, and I think that's also difficult if you've had, but it's important, because you got to think everyone got together for some reason. You were attracted to each other. You have some, beautiful things that have happened in your life, but sometimes it's that fake relationship again where eventually that well will dry. You can't, fake it forever. And all of a sudden, here comes the drama. And get back to the compassion, because you start off that way, don't we? Don't we start off with that? When you first date someone, they can do no wrong. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
We need to
well,
kind of go
when you're
back
first
to
dating someone, your brain is, swimming in a bunch of chemicals that go away after 4 months to a year. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of dopamine. There's a lot of reward. There's a lot of bonding, oxytocin, and basically you get your blinders on, and you don't pay attention to those things. And the things that are cute when you're first going out with someone, those are the things that people end up hating years later. Like, it was so cute the way you slurp your noodles. Then 10 years later, it's like, why do you eat so noisy?
I'm going to throw the noodle soup on your face.
I think that's
but the thing is, with your relationship, people are looking for someone to rescue them magically,
Oh, yeah, the white horse.
And a lot of times
stallion.
the connection is out of their shared trauma. And so it's unconscious. People aren't aware of their trauma if they haven't done the personal work. But you meet someone, and your trauma and their trauma are very similar. And you've lived through something very similar. And so you immediately feel like you know the other person really, really well.
Oh, wow,
and
that's
so
dangerous.
You form this deep connection right away. But as is with so many people, you don't really know who you're with, because it's a lot of it. I won't say it's all projection, but a lot of it is idealized projections, right? And then the chemicals wear off, and you get used to them, and the sex isn't as amazing anymore, and you find out what they're really like in the morning, or when they're not trying to act their nicest all the time, they're not actually so nice. And then people are stuck, though, because they have formed an attachment, and now they're like trapped.
Yeah.
That's when things don't go well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many
The book is
people,
for people who are having trouble. There's plenty of good relationships.
When friends of ours start first dating, especially from the woman's side, one of the comments we hear a lot is that, I just met this person, and wow, we spent 2 whole days and nights just talking for hours and hours and hours. And that seems to be a criteria. This, like, they told each other everything in the first couple days.
Right.
Yeah.
Their whole life story, all these intimate details that later on they're like, why did I say that?
And if the man listens to the woman, you've got like 10 points right there.
Right. And
Whether or
guys
not
can
you're
do that
truly
for a
listening.
couple of days, usually.
Yeah. It's true.
Yep.
It's really true. Well, what's interesting, too, is you have couples, we all know couples where they're like the perfect couple, and, they'll never get divorced. They'll never break up, and they always seem so happy and so la, la, la. And then out of the blue, they're out. They're over. And you're like, dude, no, none of us have a chance now. You were like the couple we always looked at going, if they can, they're making it. They're doing it. Someone's happy. And then all of a sudden, how does it just happen?
Right.
Because isn't that whole thing what you're talking about is there's the habits, and it becomes this routine. Like your relationship becomes a routine.
People cover stuff up, and especially in families with trauma or alcoholism, that is exactly what you train your whole childhood to do, is to act in public like you have the most ideal family in the world. It's like a Disney relationship, and people do that in their adulthood, and they're scared of showing any kind of flaws or weakness, and the two of them are, they make a deal together to act a certain way, but it's not an explicit deal. It's an unspoken deal. But the thing, what you were saying about being so close right off the bat, is that's wonderful, but it's not the foundation for a long-term relationship. It's the beginning. Some people overshare, which is not a good idea if the person who you're meeting is actually not very trustworthy.
Right, exactly.
You meet someone who's actually kind of a manipulative guy, and he's acting really sweet and vulnerable because he knows how to do that, and then you give him all the information that he needs to emotionally manipulate you, which is hard to restrain yourself when you haven't had a drink of water and you've been in the desert for years. People just want to drink it up.
And there's people who prey on that.
Oh, for sure.
There's definitely people who prey on that, and you just walk right into it, and off it happens, and your friends will try and tell you, and you're in trouble.
That's a different kind of relationship book. I've seen these videos and books. There's usually men, sadly, on YouTube who are basically like, this is how you pick up a woman, and it's completely manipulative. And when people have experienced developmental trauma, their radar for who they can trust is off. They've experienced betrayal quite often in intimate family relationships, so they kind of gravitate unconsciously toward similar people. And people are so desperate to kind of find out who they are. When they meet someone who seems similar, it's like this instant bond.
That's
It's
true.
like, oh, your favorite book is Catcher in the Rye? This is like an amazing coincidence.
And
right? We're the
sometimes
only
they're
two
not,
people in the world
they're
who love
lying.
Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, some people lie. Some people lie about that, and then they'll watch football, with their boyfriend and pretend to like it. There's that thing, and that's that fakeness. Reading your book, Relationship Sanity, one of the things to me that really stands out is I think everyone should read it, because there's going to be things you don't know that you're doing and that you should be aware of with your life to be able to have a good relationship, to have that bond, that strength. Like Khalil Gibran, I can't remember the quote exactly, in The Prophet, he was talking about a relationship is like, here you're the tree. The relationship is the trunk of the tree. Your branch is this way, your partner's branch is the other way, and you unite at that trunk, like what you were saying with the bird singing. And when you read a book like this, Relationship Sanity, you can really start to take stock of your life and take stock of your relationship, so you don't fall into that fakeness. Because then you're starting to be fake to yourself. If you're lying to somebody else, you're lying to the world. You are lying to yourself, and so you'll turn on yourself, and then you'll turn out on other people. That's kind of
like it's a little bit unfair to say that it's a fake relationship, though it makes sense, because people in dysfunctional relationships usually, with the exception of manipulative, sociopathic people, they really do want to get along with each other most of the time, and they really are trying the best that they're able to, but they're caught up in these kind of inherited patterns of behavior. In Relationship Sanity, we try to help people get really present with themselves individually and present together. That's really what the 40-20-40 is designed to do as a practice.
And it's I think that our lifestyles are so over busy and we move so fast that we barely really think before we speak or when we're in anything that we do. Even how people drive, were you really thinking when you cut those three people off? No, I'm just in a hurry. We're so fast-paced that I don't think we give very much thought to a lot of things.
Well, reading a book is the first step. That's what I think.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, it's good because we instruct the reader at each chapter. It ends with exercises that are carefully designed to start, as I said, basically with compassion and awareness, and then build skills on top of that basic skill. And as you're saying, you're in a rush. Again, the parasympathetic nervous system is cranked up, and the higher parts of the brain go offline. That's like where road rage comes from. You're not exercising top-down control. In your relationship, we call that brain lock. Your brain is locked into this, state of activation and old patterns. With the 40-20-40, people don't get it right away. It takes practice, but the instructions are, first of all, don't try to have the conversation if you're not both willing to give it a fair shot. Everyone makes mistakes. Like I said, it takes practice. And you speak for 3 to 5 minutes, taking turns. And the person who's speaking is instructed to speak authentically from their heart, not accusing or criticizing the other person, and not sort of fake speaking from the heart, which people do. Like, I feel like you were a jerk, versus I feel hurt. You ask someone how they feel, and they say, I feel like you're an idiot, which isn't really a feeling. And then when the person listens, we want people to listen compassionately. There's something called compassionate listening from the heart. And we listen non-judgmentally. And you know what happens when couples argue. You know, you sort of listen, but what are you doing when you're listening?
Thinking about what you're going to say next.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you're making your case.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you think
right?
you know what they're going to say. Yeah, we know what they're going to say, and then you're just like, you know, I know what you're going to say, so there it is. And I'm on to mine now.
Yeah, you're getting your defense ready. Like, well, I didn't really mean that. I didn't mean that you could never go out with your friends. You know, it's defensive. So when people do this, you know, over and over again, as you're saying, they settle down and they start thinking again and they start feeling again and they start communicating eventually.
You know, I think that's when you have some kind of structure, this kind of tool to work off of, instead of, because you can try and do your own relationship stuff, and if you created it, then you're already going to get attacked. You know what I mean? You need somebody else. It's like this is coming from, you know, professionals who've done all this. I mean, this is research. You're all qualified getting together and doing this and giving us this plan to follow. And I think it's absolutely right. When you are able to start working on something, it's not going to be perfect the first time, but you just keep working on it. There's compassion to your partner when you go through this, but also when, okay, you're the one, you know that you did something wrong. Don't you have to also be compassionate to yourself to be able to move through it and not beat yourself up for the rest of your life, depending on what you did? I mean, you know, if anything got violent and crazy, then, you know, we that's a whole other deal. But you know what I mean? You've got to kind of also be kind to yourself.
Yeah, well, self-forgiveness comes up if people have really transgressed, and that can be a big piece of work to do. But I personally, I don't believe actually that compassion can tell the difference between me and you. I think compassion is a state of mind. And if you're truly compassionate for the other person, you're not going to be able to stop being compassionate for yourself. Now, you meet people who say they're compassionate for other people, but I'm not nice to myself. I don't think that's really compassion. That's more like a kind of compulsive caregiving. And that's part of your relationship where you're like, I'm being a good person by taking care, and so I'm compassionate. But again, I don't really think that's what true compassion feels like. True compassion is more like a global state of mind. And if you're in a compassionate state of mind, you're going to be compassionate to yourself. You're going to be compassionate to the guy who you know served you coffee in the morning. You're going to be compassionate to the driver who cut you off. You're going to be compassionate to your wife and kids. You know, like I say, compassion doesn't know self and other. Can
you Can we send this to all politicians? Relationship-Sanity? I'm just saying.
Send it to all politicians?
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually tweet stuff, you know, at politicians, but I don't know if I'm getting through.
I know, it's like some compassion with that. You know, there's compassion needs to happen in the world, and I think this is the beauty of it, of your book. I do want to ask, how did the three relationship amigos get together and start writing a book together? Because that's a relationship. That's a relationship to have that handle and, you know, be able to put it all together and you know, make it make sense for all of us. Because I know there's a lot of research that goes in this, but how did this all begin?
Well, you know, it's a complicated story, and I'm not really at liberty to share it. I'm kidding. Partially.
I'm like, dude, whoa, this is cool.
It's a secret.
Let's get the compassion. Let's get to the juicy stuff.
It's a scandal.
Yeah. Well, I know Mark Borg from psychoanalytic training. I'm a psychiatrist, and he's a psychologist, and we trained psychoanalytically in the same institute. And we had some personal connections and people we knew together, and I learned that Mark was writing a book, and actually we don't quite remember exactly how it happened. I think we have slightly different perspectives on and how we think things came together, but we ended up deciding to write a book together, and Mark knew Danny Berry, so Mark is the common person here, and we were talking about a book that was going to be about an idea Mark had called human antidepressant, which I think we talk about in Your Relationship. This is like one side of the Your Relationship dynamic, the person who's doing their best to keep the other person from getting depressed. And so that's the human antidepressant. And, you know, we went through all these business plans and book manuscripts. We got a book agent, and we started brainstorming on something that would make more sense. And we, after a lot of brainstorming, we thought about and came up with the term irrelationship, which is a combination of the word irrelation, which is a word, and relationship. As we didn't want to call it like pseudo love or fake love, because, like I said, it's a real dynamic, although it's a traumatized dynamic. And you know, we've been writing together ever since.
Wow.
And it made sense to write Relationship Sanity because the readers of Irrelationship wanted a couples book, and it's kind of half workbook, half self-help book.
It's like, how do we go from here? You know, and that's like I said, when people meet, there is something that gets you together for some, you know, a bunch of reasons, right? How people fall in love and really go there, and it is easy to get off track. It is easy to go back to or continue behaviors from your past or from your childhood, and I think this is it not only heals relationships when people work on the different tools that you have, but I think it's also really good for people to read for themselves. If you're going to get married, don't you think they should read both books first before they get married or take big steps in life?
I mean, I have a conflict of interest. I'm even squirrely about recommending my book to my patients. I often recommend another couple's book by a colleague called Healing Together by Suzanne Phillips, which is an excellent book, and it's directly about trauma. And it's like the question when people say, oh, you're a therapist, don't you think everyone should be in therapy? But I do believe, I think it is true that many couples enter into serious relationships without knowing how to do it. And there's no good reason why we shouldn't learn those things. And nowadays kids are being taught things like this in school a little bit.
Oh, really?
You know,
wow.
like not about how to have adult relationships, but how to be compassionate, how to deal with feelings, how to be more empathic, how to resolve conflict constructively. My kids go to a school where when they're in third grade, when there's a fight between two kids, they go to the peace table together.
Wow.
And they put their hand on a globe, and they try to talk it through. And if they can't talk it through, they get another kid to try to mediate, which goes to what you're saying, having like a 40-20-40, it's like having a referee. Because if you're having a fight with someone and you're trying to also tell them how they should act to have a fair fight, you know, they're going to be resentful. So putting the authority into a third party helps.
Well, it taught me, as soon as I read that, I'm like, okay, swallow, swallow. It really, it's powerful because I see patterns from all different places. For me personally, when you know, and looking at this, I'm like, there's an because you recognize things that you're doing, and I don't like what I recognized. But the fact is, I have the ability to change them. So it's good to recognize them, and you have to like swallow it and go, okay, none of us are perfect, but you recognize that it's up to you to now make that change. Now, if you don't and you just ignore it, then I can call myself out, you know, but it really, it is powerful. It made me sit up straight. And now I mean, every thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, I have a very strong desire, you know, largely in part because of some difficulties I had in childhood and maybe some genetic and cultural factors to try to help people. And so it really makes me feel good to hear that it has that kind of impact and value. But like you're saying, it's like it's a bitter pill to swallow. And the first step in the dream sequence is discovery. And discovery together is easier for couples. You know, you can have a therapist and, you know, that helps as well because there's another person. But if you're a team and, you know, you've committed to work on your issues to help your relationship grow, and you've done all the compassion work beforehand, before you do the dream sequence, you're using the 40-20-40 and you're using compassion-based practice, you're in a much better position to encounter what Jung called the shadow, the things that we all want to avoid, but we may know on some level that the longer we avoid dealing with the problem, the worse it is, and the more we're going to regret it, because the more loss and loneliness we're accepting.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
someone who does work like this, the later they are in their relationship, the longer they've gone, the more they say, I wish I had read this, 5 years ago or before we got married.
Yeah, I was
People are afraid, though, if they deal with their stuff, then they just won't get married. No.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
Sometimes.
that a lot of us were brought up, I know how I was brought up, with the idea that you don't air your dirty laundry. You don't tell anybody anything that should be private.
That's
and
right.
When you go to school, if your teacher asks you something, I remember, being told certain things you cannot ever tell the teacher. And I remember when Lisa went to school, she came home with a little notebook, a diary that she was supposed to fill out every day, and the teacher's instructions were to say what was going on in your home. And I'm like, what do you mean?
What are you doing?
What do you think? No, you're not doing.
Like the little spy.
I know. I'm like, what do you mean?
That's right. That's the dirty laundry.
And I didn't even think. I still remember it because I was upset. I'm like, what is this teacher trying to do? And also because I was one of the few. We lived in Africa, and I was probably the only divorced woman with a child where Lisa went to school.
Oh yeah.
And so I was
you were an outcast.
Totally. None of the women, because they were all married, would even be friends. They were like totally, because this is a long time ago, but they were all like, she's going to take me. She's going to take our husbands.
Yeah.
So it was
really
difficult.
That sounds very sad, and the opposite of what we need.
It's kind of funny now, but I remember when that book came home and she's going to now say everything that happened in our household. I was like, oh, no, you're not.
It's funny. It's funny how things like that can go through in life. And really appreciate your books and appreciate you joining us, Dr. Brenner. Everyone, again, the book is Relationship-Sanity, Creating and Maintaining Healthy Relationships by Dr. Brenner, Mark Borg, and also Daniel Berry. And again, it's through Central Recovery Press. Get it on Amazon, all those places you get good books. And go to irrelationship.com. They're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. And we've got a good song for you, Dr. Brenner. Oh, we got to give out
I can't wait to hear it. Thank you
for
having
website.
me.
Grant-H-Brenner-MD.com. That's the website for Dr. Brenner. But this song, we thought we had to do it because it is about relationships, and it's called Breakthrough. See? So if you have relationship sanity, you'll have a breakthrough. And so this is from our friend Dino Jag, a singer-songwriter based in southern Australia, and you can go to dinojag.com. Here it is, Breakthrough. Thanks so much for joining us. You take care.
You too. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Have I told you I'm spinning, and it's 'cause of you, but it feels like magic, and you're shaking my walls, they're crumbling down, and all the pieces are falling for you. No one else, 'cause you're my breakthrough. No one else, you're my rescue. Wake up with me and stay for the rest of your life. I'll give you my best, whatever you need. I just wanna be with you. No one else, got myself a tattoo. You should have told me, you should have warned me, I'll never be the same. I'd have to hold on tight for the rest of my days. So let me hold you. Let me hold you. And have I told you I'm crazy? Well, it's true. I'm crazy about you. And I'm feeling so tall. My head's above the clouds. I'm on a rainbow ride, doing color slides, and the pin so high, all because of you.